Kate and Jim have been married about 5 years now. They came back to St. Paul's when their 3-year-old son was baptized. Just a month ago, they had their second child, a daughter. Kate has taken some time from work and will return in a couple of months. In the meantime, she is at home with the children. Her day is pretty long since her husband does not return from work until after 5 p.m. Some days, she just wishes she could have an adult conversation. She feels isolated from her church community since it is difficult right now to get to church. Sadie has been a member of St. Paul's for more than 45 years. She has always attended services on Sunday and enjoys the relationship she's made over those years. Unfortunately, Sadie is no longer able to drive herself, and so she can't attend church as often or like she used to. Her family is very attentive to her needs, though she misses her connection with her church community. Joe is a regular at 8 o'clock service. He lives alone and his family lives out of town. 4 months ago, he was laid off from his job. He has enough money saved for another month or so, but is concerned that if he doesn't find a job soon, his money will run out. He could really use some support, but he's a little embarrassed to ask for help. Ann and John came to church faithfully and were very involved in the church when their children were young. Now their children are all grown up and they live out of state. Unfortunately, John had a stroke and is now confined to home. Though they do have some help, Ann finds herself isolated and at times overwhelmed with the care of her husband. Sue and Mike have 2 teenage daughters and recently have taken in Mike's mom, who's unable to live alone in her home. Both work and have made arrangements for the care of Mike's mom during the day. With the demands of work, raising teenage daughters, and caring for a mom, Sue and Mike are quite overwhelmed. They try to keep their connection to church, but it's difficult. Jane and Bob have been members of St. Paul's for about 10 years. Their 3 adult children are married with children and live in the area, so they see them often. About 3 years ago, Jane's sister, Pam, died suddenly. They were only 1.5 years apart in age, and they were very close. There are days, especially the anniversary of birthdays and holidays, when Jane becomes very sad and emotional. Her family tries to be supportive, but does not really understand why Jane hasn't gotten over her sister's death yet. Tom and Sarah just sent their 4th child off to college. Sarah has always worked part-time, so she spent much of the time caring for her home and her children. She's having a tough time adjusting to the empty nest. She knows that her life is changing, but finds herself lonely and wondering how she will fill her days. Sophie's husband died after a long illness. She had a very hard time in the initial months after his loss. She was not used to living alone. Her family lived out of town, and they didn't spend as much time with her as they all would have liked. She had been married a long time, and she finds it very comforting to share her memories. Will and Betty have 2 children. Ben is 15, Sam is 20. They were faithful churchgoers until very recently. After starting college, their son Sam began to show signs of depression and substance abuse. This was very upsetting for the family, and they were struggling with accepting this very frightening situation. They felt isolated and even embarrassed. They needed support, but they didn't know how to ask for it. All these situations have something in common. They all represent life changes that can leave us sad, depressed, isolated, and overwhelmed. Many of us will face some of these at one point in our life. Yet we do not have to face them alone. Our faith community can help provide support and a listening ear. When we hear about pastoral visits or a pastoral care team, we usually think of illness. Church communities have long provided visits to members who are in the hospital, in a nursing home, or confined to home. Many of the situations I have outlined do not immediately come to mind when we think about pastoral visiting. Last fall, we introduced to the parish the pastoral care team, but unfortunately, we haven't received many referrals for people in need of pastoral visits. We know that it is difficult for people to ask for help, so I am taking this opportunity to ask for your assistance. Here at St. Paul's, we have 7 members of the parish pastoral care team, who along with Reverend Suzanne provide pastoral care. It is our responsibility as a Christian community to care for one another, to rejoice in times of joy, and to be with one another in times of challenge. Jesus has commanded us to love one another. His own example and that of his disciples demonstrated how we are to bring healing and peace to our neighbors. There were times in the past of church history when only the pastor would be expected to make pastoral visits. Today, with the emphasis on ministry and the emphasis on our baptismal call that calls us to serve in God's name, we know that there are members of the faith community who have been called to offer pastoral care. As I said, we have 7 people here at St. Paul's: Kurt Ryder, Quentin Johansson, Trish Leonard, Mary Palankos, Marianne Sobleski, Kathy Sweeney, and Gloria Cannonberg. They not only have felt called to this ministry, they have also participated in a training program and continue to attend ongoing formation sessions. They compose what we call the pastoral care team. Their compassion and their own faith journey have led them to pursue this ministry of the church. To accompany this pastoral care team, we have Food for Friends and Ride for Friends. We know there are situations that make it difficult for families to prepare meals. Sue Collada has agreed to coordinate efforts to help provide families with meals. We have done this in the past, and we would like people to take advantage of this more often. We also know that sometimes people need assistance in getting to doctor appointments or treatments. Ride for Friends provides transportation in those circumstances, as well as providing rides to special church events. We know that people can be very private and reluctant to ask for help. That is why we rely on our parishioners, you, to encourage those in need to make their needs known. We ask that if you know someone who could use some support and assistance, that you approach them and encourage them to complete one of our forms. The information is kept confidential, and either myself or Reverend Susanna will contact the person making the request. This is what our form looks like. It tells a little bit about the services we offer, and then there is a response card at the end that you can just tear off. And that provides the information we need to respond to any of the needs. We had them out in the vestibule as you're coming in, but there were other things that have been happening lately, so you will see another display of these with a container that you can fold these response cards and place them in. And at the end of every service, we will check them. You can also approach one of the members of the team or myself if you have any requests or questions. And so I ask you, the community of St. Paul, to consider how you might assist us in our efforts to provide pastoral care. Will you help us to identify those in our community who are in need? And will you consider whether you might be called to bring compassion and care to your fellow parishioners by providing pastoral visits, transportation, or meals? I end this morning with a Buddhist blessing. May I be a guard for those who need protection, a guide for those on the path, a boat, a raft, a bridge for those who wish to cross the flood. May I be a lamp in the darkness, a resting place for the weary, a healing medicine for those who are sick, a vase of plenty, a tree of miracles, and for the boundless multitudes of living beings, may I bring sustenance and awakening, enduring like the earth and sky, until all beings are freed from sorrow and all are awakened. Amen.